Yo, Hegassen here, and today we are talking about Iron Man 3. There it is, Iron Man 3. Now, I think I'm going to be in the minority when it comes to reviewing this one by having a look at online. So let's get straight into it. So yes, Iron Man 3. Like I said, I think I'm in the minority here because I think this film is shit. But let's get into why. So let's start off with the plot. There's actually some strengths here, especially at the beginning. We see Tony Stark dealing with the events of the Avengers, and he's got like a little bit of a post-traumatic stress disorder, a lot of anxiety. You know, he keeps having flashbacks about the wormhole and the alien invasions. He can't get off his head, he can't sleep. So he's spending his time building Iron Man suits, you know, doing what he knows, trying to protect himself and the world, but that's also, you know, he's disconnecting from the world. He's not communicating with Pepper as much as he used to, you know, so he's going through a rough time, and all that's really interesting. There's a good little scene with him and War Machine. They're in a cafe, and this little kid gives him a picture, and it's got the wormhole on it. Tony Stark.
An astronaut, a radiation wave hit, and I got shot through a wormhole.
And he has a complete like mental breakdown, and he only feels safe when he's in his Iron Man suit. So that's really good. Then, while all of this is happening, that you see all these flashes on the TV of this terrorist called the Mandarin. There's some really cool things where he hijacks the TV, and he's this really sinister guy, and you know, he's doing all these cruel acts across the world, and that's kind of what Rhodey's looking into. But Tony then gets involved when Happy Hogan gets caught up in an explosion that was caused by the Mandarins. So Tony then starts investigating as well. You know, it was good to see the interactions at the beginning of the film with Tony and Happy. You know, they still got a really good relationship. I like the scene where he's got the iPad and he's trying to record these guys that he thinks shady. Obviously, his instincts are correct because they were shady, and he doesn't know how to flip the camera around. It's good, that dynamic between them where, you know, Happy is not a tech guy at all and Tony is the most tech guy ever. And then from there, for me, the film starts to go a little bit downhill. Tony, in a bit of rage, gives his address out on public TV to the Mandarin, and what a stupid move. You know, and then the Mandarin obviously attacks his house, and Tony hasn't got anything ready. You'd think he'd have all of his suits lined up ready or something like that, but no, he hasn't got anything ready. So his house goes down, and then Tony ends up in this little town with this kid, and the film just starts feeling completely different to how it felt at the beginning of the film. The interactions with Tony and the kid are good, but from this point on in the film, Tony's pretty much without his suit. And while at first that's good, you know, you get to see the fact that Tony can still be a badass as Tony and not as Iron Man for the rest of the film. No point even calling it Iron Man. I think he pops in them every now and then, but for the most part, he is just Tony Stark. The Tony Stark movie. And like I say, from here the film starts to go downhill. This film is a long runtime. It's about almost 3 hours, and parts of the film just feel so different from all of the other ones. You know, and I just start losing interest from this area. The main reason, and a reason why I think that people that do not like this film kind of get a little bit of a disconnect in the film, is when Tony finally infiltrates the manor where the Mandarin is, and we find out that the Mandarin that we've seen on TV, that's been this badass guy, you know, he's been really cool, you know, he's controlling like the president and stuff, he's got put his phone number in the president's phone somehow, he's committing these terrorist acts live on TV, and he's a drunk actor called Tony, I think. Called Trevor. And yeah, I don't know how I feel about this. It's an example of one of the biggest criticisms I have on this film that I'll touch on in a little bit. When I first saw it in the cinema, I thought it was hilarious. I was like, oh, that's a brave move, that's a twist, I never saw that coming, I can't believe it. Going back, I'm like, it's funny, but is it that good of a choice? Because the villain is then replaced by the actual villain of the piece, Aldrich Killian, and his boat shoes, and he is rubbish. Like, for the third Iron Man film, for the third time in a row, The villain is just another angry businessman, and compared to what we saw of the early Mandarin, he's not interesting at all. He has these powers caused by extremis. His whole thing, he's made this extremis thing, which is like the super regenerative power, but for some reason it also gives you like super heat powers, kind of like a oven from One Piece, from my One Piece fans. And he can also breathe fire. I mean, I don't know how that really works. How would having super healing powers also heat up your body? Like, surely heating up your body would damage your body more than it would heal it. So that doesn't really make sense. And he's just not an interesting bad guy. His whole reason for being bad and not liking Tony is because Tony abandoned him on a roof one time. Like, get over it, mate. And now when I go back, I just see that Mandarin scene. I'm like, such a wasted opportunity. Of course, the Mandarin is all about sorcery and magic and stuff. And maybe at that point in the MCU, it wasn't really in a place to set up that stuff. I'm glad they set it up with Doctor Strange. But I feel like now that they've done that with the Mandarin, you're kind of never gonna really get that. Obviously, there are some hints in like this thing on a Blu-ray, this one shot, that maybe there is actually a real Mandarin. And I do like the theories that Trevor is actually being like a double bluff, and he was actually the Mandarin pretending to be Trevor, just to like get away with it all and hide the fact that he really was the Mandarin. But I do feel like it was a bit of a wasted opportunity, really, when you go back, especially when the villain that we got wasn't that interesting at all. I don't really like those heat explosive powers. They just seem a bit weird and bland. I don't know. They all feel like they're fighting a bunch of X-Men when we haven't even got X-Men. And Pepper ends up with these powers, and then by the end of the film, she hasn't even got these powers. So yeah, it's not that interesting for me. So I don't like the villain, and I'm undecided really on how I feel about the Mandarin. But what about the other characters? Well, all of the core characters are still really good. Obviously, we got Tony back, and Tony's still as good as ever. There's a little bit where, like I say, he's not in the Iron Man suit as much. That is kind of his journey throughout the film, learning to work without the Iron Man suit. But it takes up way too much of the film. To the point where it's an Iron Man film without really Iron Man. Pepper's good, but then, like I say, at the end of the film, she ends up with superpowers, and then she doesn't have superpowers by the time that you get to the credits. Happy's great. War Machine's good. It's good to see War Machine again. And he has a lot more to do in this film. Of course, now he's Iron Patriot, because he's now kind of working as like a bodyguard more for like the president, and working more closely with the president and the military, as opposed to kind of being Tony Stark's sidekick. By the way, I forgot to mention in my Avengers review, where was War Machine in that film? They never bring it up at all. It's just strange. It takes so long for him to finally actually become part of the Avengers, and even then, half the Avengers are dead. So that's probably why he got the slot. So yeah, all of the returning characters are good, but it's the overall story that I don't like. And the main reason for this is the humour. In the Avengers, I think they really set up the kind of the benchmark of the humour. Marvel has this really fine balance of humour, characters, and plot. And Avengers really had all of them together quite perfectly. Later on, other films, they might sometimes have a little bit more humour, a little bit more character, or a little bit less humour, a little bit more plot. But for the most part, they have a pretty even distribution. Obviously, some films like, say, the Guardians of the Galaxy 2 and stuff, they'll do a few more extended jokes and a few more kind of humorous scenes. But that's more of the fact that they are more geared towards that, more towards comedy. And then you get films like Winter Soldier and stuff that are a little bit more plot heavy. But in Iron Man, they take the humour, and they take the humour that you get in Iron Man, and they really ramp it up to 100. And I think in this case, it's a negative for the film, because every time the plot gets going, every time it's about to get serious, they pull it back down with a gag, or there's a payoff is completely ruined by a joke. And it just, as the film goes on, it really grinds you. There's still some good banter, that kind of Iron Man quick witty banter that I do like. Him when Tony Stark, when he's talking to the kid, you got some really good banter between them two. At the end, there's a good little bit with Rhodey and Tony Stark where they're talking about the guns, and even though Tony used to make guns, he's unaware about the fact that the ammo that Rhodey has won't fit in the gun that Tony has, and Tony's like, he fires at someone, misses, hits a light bulb, and he's like, oh, I meant to do that, no one can hit a light bulb. And then Rhodey does that straight away. Now, that's a good little bit of banter, but then there's some other jokes that are just drawn out, like the one where Tony's tied to the bed and he's calling in his Iron Man suit and he's like, 3, 2, 1, and it doesn't turn up, and then it goes on and on and on. And, you know, like I say, this is a long film, and then we got a long joke in the middle of it, stretching the film out even longer. At first it was funny, but then it starts to lose its humour as the joke goes on, and going back and rewatching it, it really slows down the film. Thor Ragnarok did the exact same joke where Thor's calling his hammer in the scene with Surtur, and it works there because they got the timing down perfectly. And there's so many other scenes as well where you're building up to an epic moment, like in the final fight where he's fighting Aldrich and he calls in his suit, and just as the suit's about to go on him, it hits something and explodes into loads of pieces. There's the epic scene where everyone's fallen out of an airplane and he's saving them. Really good scene. And then right at the end, just after his epic moment, his suit gets hit by a truck and it falls apart. And there's just so many instances of that where it grinds down to a halt, or any climax, like big climax of an action scene, is ruined by some kind of cheap joke. And they're normally always at the expense of the Iron Man suits, which is another criticism that I have to go into with this film. So the Iron Man suits in this film, what is going on with them? He's developed it now so that each individual component, whether it be his shoulder pads or his groin guard or his gloves, they like individual things that he can summon and they'll fold onto him. First of all, that doesn't make any sense at all, mainly as the fact that each individual component is powered by like these little booster rockets, and then they fly towards him and latch on. First of all, I'm pretty sure that that'll hurt. You know, if you have a chest plate come flying towards you and fold around your chest, pretty sure that's going to hurt. You know, you're still going to feel the force of it hitting you. And then there's the fact that each, like I say, they all have like little booster rockets on them. Each individual component. Where's all this fuel kept? You know, you got a mask and it's got like 6 or something little booster rockets on it. It's a thin mask. What is it, full of fuel? So his entire suit is full of fuel, and they're flying like miles. I think in the same way he's tied up to the bed, he goes to one of the henchmen, oh, how far away is the town? The town being where he left his Iron Man suit. And the guy is like, I wrote it down, 832 miles. So his little mask with all the little booster rockets in it flies 832 miles and doesn't run out of fuel. What? That doesn't make any sense. And what's powering it? Obviously, when they connect to him, they're powered by the arc reactor. But when they're individual components, they're not connected to the arc reactor. They all got their own little arc reactors. It doesn't make any sense. I know that it's a film about a man wearing an already unrealistic suit, but in how they did it here, it doesn't really fit. Later on, he gets the nanotechnology suit, which, as these films progress, it makes a little bit more sense because they have a little bit more technology. But here, I don't know, this one bugs me a lot more than it does the nanosuit one. Also because of the fact that these suits just seem to constantly fall apart and be ripped apart so easily. In the final fight, we see people ripping off panels. Every time he gets punched, that some panels fall off. There's multiple scenes where the suits just fall apart. Like I say, the suit gets hit by a truck and it falls apart. And half the time the suits are just flying around on their own without even anybody in them. So they're just hollow shells anyway. And all of the Iron Man suits just seem so weak in this film compared to what you see them in other films. Tony's also made loads of other suits, like all for different purposes. There's one whose sole purpose is as a jack to hold things up. Why'd he build that? I get that he's been bored and stuff, but why build, of all of the things he could build, why build a suit that's just a giant jack? Just build a giant jack that rolls around on wheels. And then, worst of all, at the end of the film, he blows all of his suits up. Which is just so stupid, especially considering the fact that straight after this film, there's no impact because he's rebuilt all these suits again. Not only has he rebuilt all these suits again, he's now even more obsessed at building suits because he wants to like protect the world in Age of Ultron using all of his Iron Man suits. And the fact that there's that Jack one that's holding up the structure, he blows up all of his suits. So what's holding up that structure now? It's going to fall down. And also at the end of the film, he has his arc reactor taken out. You know, the whole reason he had that was because it's stopping little bits of metal from going into his heart. And I'm pretty sure he had that because it was too dangerous to remove him or too hard to remove him. At the end of the film, he has it taken out anyway. So he loses his like Achilles heel. And then in later films, he gets it back. So what was the point in removing it? What was the point in removing that? What was the point in blowing up his suits? When in the next film, he gets it all back. And the fact that Pepper gets superpowers, and by the end of the film she's lost superpowers. Why even give her superpowers in the first place? I get that, again, the film for Tony was he was trying to learn how to be Iron Man without his Iron Man suit. But at the end of the film he didn't have an Iron Man suit, and I'm pretty sure he was about to die until Pepper with superpowers came and saved him. And while I'm ranting about some negative points, War Machine for the second film in a row gets trapped in his own suit and can't control it. And I don't know how I feel about that virtual crime scene thing. There's that scene where Happy gets caught in an explosion, and then Tony in his lab, what doesn't he have in that lab, makes like a virtual crime scene where he can like pick things up, holograms and stuff, and like replay moments that weren't even recorded. Who scanned that entire thing to make it? Again, I know it's like meant to be like a little bit of a kind of sci-fi film, but it just doesn't make any sense. He can like move rubble and stuff. Like, how do you get all that data? Apparently he hacks in a network and stuff and gets it all. But what, did somebody get a computer and scan the entire area while Happy was still laying there burnt on the floor? It doesn't make any sense. That really bugs me. Also, he still has those like little robot arms in this. And probably one of the saddest parts in the film is that his crane arms die. At the end of the film you see him put them back in a trailer, but I don't think we ever see them ever again. So crane arms are dead. Another reason to dislike this film. So, any good points? Like I say, some of the stuff with him and the kid were funny. There were some generally good lines and stuff in this film. The stuff with Happy at the beginning, I liked Tony's relationship there. I liked the early stuff of Tony going through the anxiety issues. They seem to phase off towards the end. I mean, the kid helps him out a little bit with that, but I would have liked to have seen it a little bit more. There is some good action scenes. The one where he's saving the people falling out of the plane in particular. Again, it's just a shame that he's not actually in the suit at the time. And yeah, that's about it. Like I say, I think I'm in the minority here in the fact that I don't like this film. And no matter how many times I've watched it now, I think I've seen it at least 4 times, I still just get towards the end and I've lost interest in it. I don't know what it is about this film as to why I really, really hate it, but I just do. It's not one of my favourite films. Please tell me if you do like it. Why do you think it's such a good film? What am I missing in this film? You know, what aren't I getting about it? Let me know in the comments below. And please remember that these were just my opinions. How would I rate Iron Man 3 overall? Is it the worst MCU film? I mean, I think Incredible Hulk is the worst MCU film. But the problem here is that I feel like the Incredible Hulk you could easily just take out of the MCU and completely ignore it. Iron Man 3, I feel like it's still quite integral overall. And therefore I'd probably say that, yeah, Iron Man 3 is a worse film. It is white tier. Probably below white tier. Wouldn't even pick it up if I saw it. I'm afraid that's what I think. So there you go. There's my thoughts on Iron Man 3. Please let me know what you think about it. And if you liked my video, don't forget to like and subscribe. I've been Hegassen, and I'll talk to you next time. Oh, also, I forgot to mention, at the end of this film, you see that it's actually Tony Stark laying on a sofa telling his story to Bruce Banner. So is the whole reason why the film is so weird and humorous and doesn't really fit together, and there's big scenes that have no reason because he's talking to Bruce Banner and stuff, and it's all been exaggerated by Tony? Or in which case, how much of this film actually really happened? That really confuses me as well. It's also probably one of the worst post-credit scenes.